Most baseball fans saw the highlight. The bat sailing through the air. The finger pointing. The ejection. The crowd erupting. But what most people didn't see was everything that led up to that single, explosive moment on the field, and what it reveals about the growing tension between old-school baseball thinking and the Shohei Ohtani era we are now living in. Because this wasn't just a manager losing his temper. This was a breaking point. A collision between two completely different philosophies of the game. And to truly understand what happened, you have to go back, not just to the pitch that started it all, but to the mindset that made the explosion inevitable. It started like any other at-bat. The Cardinals were locked in a tight game, the kind where every pitch feels heavier than the last. Tension had been building quietly in the dugout for innings. The Cardinals manager had been watching, calculating, growing more restless with each passing moment. Then Ohtani stepped into the box. What happened next is already part of baseball history. The pitch came in. The call was made. And in an instant, the Cardinals' dugout erupted. The manager stormed out of the dugout with an energy that told everyone in that stadium, this wasn't a normal argument. This was something that had been building for a very long time. The bat was thrown. The ejection came swiftly. And the cameras caught every second of it. But here's what the cameras didn't catch, the why. To understand the Cardinals manager's reaction, you have to understand the psychological pressure that Ohtani places on every opposing dugout, not just through his performance, but through his presence. There is a concept in elite sports called the weight of inevitability. It's the suffocating feeling a coach gets when they know, deep down, that no matter what adjustment they make, no matter what pitcher they call from the bullpen, no matter what defensive shift they deploy, the outcome feels pre-written. Ohtani gives opposing teams that feeling more consistently than any player in modern baseball history. Think about it from the Cardinals manager's perspective. You spend an entire week preparing your pitching staff. You study tendencies, launch angles, spray charts. Your coaches work late into the night breaking down video. Your pitchers rehearse their sequences in the bullpen with the discipline of surgeons. And then Ohtani walks to the plate, and makes all of it feel irrelevant. That is not a comfortable place for a competitive man to sit. And when a close call goes against you in that exact moment, the pressure has nowhere left to go. The bat throw wasn't just anger. It was the release of weeks of accumulated frustration, the kind that only Ohtani seems to produce in opposing dugouts. From the umpiring crew's perspective, the situation escalated far beyond the standard manager-umpire disagreement the moment the bat left the manager's hands. In baseball, there is a clear and well-understood line. Managers argue. They kick dirt. They get in umpires' faces. That is part of the theater of the game, and umpires are trained to manage it. But the moment equipment leaves a manager's hands, the moment a bat, a helmet, or a base becomes a projectile, the conversation ends immediately. There is no further discussion. The ejection is automatic. What made this moment particularly striking was the speed of the escalation. By all accounts from reporters at the field that day, the manager had barely exchanged 3 sentences with the home plate umpire before the bat was airborne. There was no slow build. No back and forth. No attempt to cool the temperature. This was a man who had already made up his mind before he even walked out of the dugout. And that tells you something important. The call on the field wasn't the real problem. The call was simply the match. The powder keg had been packed long before that pitch was thrown. Here is a truth that most baseball analysts don't spend enough time discussing. Ohtani doesn't just beat you with statistics. He beats you with the impossibility of preparing for him the way you prepare for everyone else. With a traditional hitter, you build a plan. You identify weaknesses. You attack specific zones at specific counts. Your pitcher goes into the game with a clear roadmap, a documented approach that has been tested and refined. With Ohtani, the roadmap exists, but the margin for error is essentially zero. Because he doesn't just cover his weaknesses like a good hitter does. He eliminates them, adjusts to adjustments, and punishes pitchers who try to get too cute with their sequencing. Multiple pitching coaches around the league have quietly acknowledged in the past year that preparing for Ohtani requires an entirely different kind of mental energy from their staff. It's not just about mechanics or location. It's about managing the psychological weight that comes with knowing one mistake, not even a bad pitch, sometimes just a slightly elevated fastball, can change the entire complexion of a game. The Cardinals' pitching staff had already given up a memorable moment to Ohtani earlier in the series. The at-bat that preceded the ejection incident was yet another showcase. And the manager, watching from the dugout, was carrying the emotional accumulation of all of it. What this incident really exposes is something that goes beyond one ejection on one night. Baseball managers today are operating in an era that has fundamentally changed the emotional contract of the job. In previous generations, a manager's worst nightmare was a power hitter on a hot streak, or an opposing ace who was untouchable for a given week. Difficult, yes. But manageable. The hot streak would cool. The ace's command would waver. Adjustments could be made. The challenge that Ohtani presents is structurally different. He isn't in a hot streak. He is simply performing at the level he has built himself to perform at, consistently, methodically, almost mechanically. And that consistency removes the psychological comfort that opposing managers have always relied on. The comfort of knowing that eventually, the scales will balance. Many managers across baseball have spoken, some publicly and some in background conversations with reporters, about the unique mental toll of game planning against Ohtani. It requires more preparation, more contingency planning, and more in-game flexibility than preparing for any other individual player in the sport. And that preparation, week after week, game after game, wears on a coaching staff in ways that don't always show up in any box score. The Cardinals manager's eruption was, in many ways, a very human response to a very inhuman standard of excellence. Step back from the drama of the ejection for a moment and look at the bigger picture it paints. We are living through a period in baseball where one player has genuinely shifted the emotional and strategic landscape of the entire sport. Not since the most dominant eras of baseball history has a single player forced opposing organizations to fundamentally reconsider how they prepare, how they pitch, and how they manage their own players' psychological states around one specific matchup. The Cardinals, to their credit, are a proud organization with a deeply rooted culture of competitive excellence. Their manager is a man who has spent decades in the game and built a career on intelligent, composed decision-making. The fact that this particular series, this particular matchup, pushed him to a moment of visible, public loss of control is not an indictment of his character. It is a testament to what Ohtani does to opposing teams. It is a testament to the pressure that builds, silently and steadily, in every dugout that has to find a way to compete against him. And it is a reminder that in this era of baseball, the question for every opposing manager before a series against the Dodgers is no longer just, how do we win? It is, how do we stay composed long enough to give ourselves a chance? In the hours after the ejection, the Cardinals organization responded with the measured professionalism that franchises default to in public moments of crisis. The manager's comments were brief, acknowledging the ejection, offering no excuses. But inside the clubhouse, the conversations were different. Players, coaches, and staff were left to process what had happened, and what it meant for the remainder of the season. An ejection of this visibility carries weight beyond the single game. It sets a tone. It sends a message, sometimes intended, sometimes not, to the players about where the emotional temperature of the dugout sits. For young players on the Cardinals roster, watching their manager reach a breaking point is a formative moment. It can either galvanize a clubhouse, creating an us-against-the-world mentality that sometimes produces surprising results. Or it can quietly introduce doubt, a sense that the mountain they're climbing is steeper than they'd previously calculated. Which direction the Cardinals take from here will say a great deal about the character of this roster. Here is what this ejection should make every baseball fan think about. When the best player in the world walks to the plate, he isn't trying to embarrass anyone. He isn't trying to get inside a manager's head. He is simply doing what he has spent his entire life preparing to do, at a level that most people in that stadium, in that dugout, and watching at home can barely comprehend. The Cardinals manager didn't lose control because he is a poor leader. He lost control because Ohtani represents a standard of excellence that is genuinely difficult to face without feeling the weight of it pressing down on you. The bat throw will be replayed on highlight reels for years. It will be remembered as a moment of chaos, of emotion, of drama. But the deeper story, the one worth remembering, is what produced it. One player. One standard. One era that baseball has never seen before. And a sport still learning how to respond to it.